Stars, cars, guitars.
On the guitar here, we have a man who's played with all the greats. It's Jimmy Cregan.
Okay, so this is Stars, Cars and Guitars, the interview part, and I'm delighted to have my dear friend Katie Melua join us today. Hi Katie, how are you?
I'm great, Jim. I'm so happy to be talking to you. I'm very, very honored to be invited, and very, very happy.
Good for you. I'm delighted you're here too. So for those who don't know anything about either of us, Katie's a rather successful singer, and I'm some sort of a shabby guitar player who for 5 years struggled to maintain my job in her band without getting fired. I got away with it. Got away with it quite successfully. And so we've toured the world together. We've traveled on tour buses. We've sat in the back of shabby clubs, and we've been on stage in the most beautiful venues for 5 years or so. And it's one of my the joys of my career to have been in your band with you. I must say to those people who haven't seen you live or don't know that much about you, which is not that many people, I have to say that you're one of the kindest and most loving people I've ever had the pleasure of standing on stage with.
Stop.
Good. So you're thoroughly embarrassed now. Good.
Well, look, I remember I was 18. I was still going to the Brit school when, this remarkable thing happened where I was in the studio just experimenting, actually. And that came about because Mike Batt, of course, was the producer, and he was looking for a singer in the style of Eva Cassidy. And, being 18, going to the Brit school, we had so many auditions to do. And the one that came round with Mike, I kind of thought it would be the same as all the others, which was, that you sort of get to a certain point, but then something doesn't work out. The project isn't right. The style of music isn't right. Sometimes the people were charlatans. But on this occasion, in Mike's studio, we, I don't know, he had these really beautiful classic sounding songs. And on literally after like 1 or 2 days of meeting, these sessions were booked with the band. And there you were with Henry Spinetti, Harry's, and I just remember like those, were really remarkable recording days, and I was like, what, 18?
Yeah, I remember very clearly meeting you. You were almost childlike at 18. You were still very innocent looking, and I remember thinking, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. We'll see what's going on. And then you opened your mouth to sing, and it was like, oh, I see what's going on here. So now those sessions were really good fun, but slightly primitive, really, in as much as Mike turned his house into a recording studio. We didn't go into a proper studio, although he had a good console and good microphones and all the rest of it. But it wasn't like going into Abbey Road or any of the other places that I've worked with Mike. So it was it was more relaxed from that point of view, because we'd all have lunch together, somebody would cook. And you remember all that?
Yeah, I mean, I just remember you're right. It was very innocent. It was very kind of unassuming in a way, even though, the place was a huge mansion. And I just remember being completely overjoyed with what you were doing. And then I remember we'd come through to the control room, and everyone just seemed really happy from what was coming out of the speakers. And also, it took me ages to realize actually that was a really unusual way of working.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the sort of the traditional way of working, where you have a band playing together at the same time, and you do maybe, I don't know, between 4 to 8 takes, and the singers there singing simultaneously. So, yeah, I realised that was very, very unusual for the early noughties.
Are you still making records in that style these days, darling?
You know what? I am still fighting to make records in that style, yeah. So since, me and Mark parted ways creatively, I made a record in Georgia, which is my home country, for those that know. It's on the other side of the Europe, so it's like the far eastern part of Europe, next to Turkey. And I teamed up with a Georgian choir, and so that was, they are phenomenal live musicians. And for me, like, yeah, it's really important to work with musicians who are truly great and they can perform under pressure, basically. And you know, and it's not seen as pressure; it's seen as a great challenge.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But I've put out one record after the record with a choir, and that, yeah, very much was made with a band playing live together.
Do you remember, after doing something in London, it might have been a television show that we shot in the late afternoon, and there was you and you. After we finished the session, we went out into the street, and there was a friend of yours, I think, called Polly.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be right?
Yeah.
And then another girl who was a lovely singer called Beth. Beth Rowley.
Oh,
and I think there was one other girl who was a pal of yours, and one of us said, probably me, why don't we nip into the pub and have a quick drink? And we all, me and four beautiful young women, went into the pub, had a drink, and then just carried on the whole night. Do you remember that?
I do.
I think if you only vaguely remember it, it's because it was a hell of a night.
Yeah, I think after the pub, yeah, I think we did drink a lot.
I think we went clubbing. I've got a horrible feeling we went clubbing. The five of us. So there's these four girls, all under 25, and this bloke who was in his early 60s. And I kept saying, look, I should leave you girls too. And you were going, no, come on, Jim, don't.
Those are such good times.
One of the questions that I had in mind was, when were you first aware of music? You know, what did you listen to? Was it your family that were playing music? Where did you first get the first kick to fall in love with music? When was that?
Because of my very unusual background of being born in Georgia, which used to be part of the Soviet Union. So I was born in 1984, and so the Soviet Union broke down in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And so my most kind of like visceral experiences of hearing music for the first time was the electricity would go out very often in Georgia in the 90s. It's known as the Dark Decade. And it would come back on for about an hour each day. And it was during that hour that my uncle, so we lived with my extended family because that's very normal for Georgia, they would rush to their cassette players and they'd put on Queen or Led Zeppelin.
Okay. All right.
And so, yeah, it was that. I remember that. And in the evenings when the electricity was gone, Mum would play the piano and she'd play things like classical pieces by Chopin or Beethoven.
Oh, nice. Okay. So when you got, because you and I were down in South Africa together, weren't we? At the Nelson Mandela Festival, celebrating his, it was about his release from prison, wasn't it? And Queen were there, and you got invited to sing with those guys. So that must have been, that would be like me getting up and singing with the Beatles, you know. Because they're my early influences, and I guess that's the same for you.
It was just I don't know if I can describe it. It was mind-blowing. I was actually in Moscow when we got the phone call that Brian May had heard that I was a big fan of Queen, and that was sort of how this ended up happening. And then, of course, I had to get my uncles. Do you remember my uncles?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And my uncle, actually, he's absolutely petrified of flying. Like, he's really chronically afraid of flying. But when I told him it was because I was going to be on stage with Roger Taylor and Brian May, he was like, okay, I'm going to get on that flight. It was remarkable.
Yeah, it was great. I watched it from the audience.
I remember actually Henry saying to me, oof, Roger, he plays really loud.
Yeah, he does, yeah.
Yeah, he really did.
And Brian, apparently. But I mean, I've never stood on stage. I've played in the studio with Brian, but I've never been on stage with him. But apparently it's seriously hefty, and there's no turning him down. No, that's the way it comes. So let's get on with it. But there was on a slightly more serious note, the idea that beautiful young women start their careers and get a break with the record company giving them a hefty push. and making a couple of albums that might do well. Do you think there's a certain amount of should we say, maybe even sexism in the record business, that there's always a new girl coming up fast behind you, and they're trying to record companies will be trying to get them through the door rather than you, who've already been through the door and made a great career?
You know what? I think everyone has their own challenges and things that they have to deal with. In my case, I kind of had the opposite, meaning, and I don't think this was particularly because I was a woman, or any other reason. But the situation I found myself in was that I suddenly had a huge demand of continuing to work and putting records out at a fast pace. So almost, it's almost the opposite, but it's just as bad because, you haven't got space to breathe and to kind of just think, okay, what are we doing here? And hold on, I want to live a little. But I couldn't, because, those early records, they were sustaining a record company and they were sustaining people's jobs. And it just so happened that, that system was reliant on us putting out records. And I don't know, I've always tried to kind of not get too sort of sucked into labels and thinking that it's, or identity politics, where it's like, okay, it's because I'm a woman. Like if I was a man, maybe it would have been different. But I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily have the answers to these questions, but one thing I do know is you have to surround yourself with really good people in the record industry. And I must say, like, Sumit, my manager, he's someone that also believes in just, basic kindness and humanity and mental health and keeping, and managing our energy, as in like, working 5 days a week, not 7 days a week, which sure happen in the music industry. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Well, yes, I remember too that when we were traveling around the world, especially if we had a bus involved, where I would know more about what you were up to, because sometimes we would finish a show and get on the bus and drive maybe even overnight to arrive at the next town, and we'd check into a hotel. We didn't live on the bus, but we had sleeper beds and all the rest of it. And I remember waking up and finding you on the phone doing a drive time, 8 a.m. And we'd been drinking and talking and carrying on in the bus till maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, and you would catch whatever sleep you could, and then it's as if your day was 3 times longer than my day. My day didn't really need to start to a sound check, right? But your day started at 8 a.m. talking to people, and you'd be doing telephone interviews most of the day. And I thought, I mean, I know you were only young and full of vitality, but still I looked at you and I thought, this is really hard work. This girl it was hard enough work to be on tour without having to do all that as well. It was as if the demands on your time never stopped. That's what it felt like to me. And I'm just an observer of this and a pal of yours, obviously, and playing in your band. But I thought at the time, this is quite hard to sustain. And it turned out to be the case, didn't it? It wore you out.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think it wore me out because I sort of had this innate idea that you have to work hard. And so when suddenly you win the lottery, in terms of what happened with me and the record sales, it's like, I need to work hard. And you sort of work hard to almost justify the success.
Okay.
It's a bit of a dangerous cocktail.
yeah, it's true. Yeah. I liked that side of you that didn't seem to be in the slightest bit interested in the trappings of being a successful artist. You just carried on being you. I remember you saying to me one time when we showed up at some television studio, I said, so how did you manage with the parking and everything? You said, I came on the tube. You were still, I don't know if you still do take the tube, but in those days, you were all over the place with, a couple of #1 albums. And so and there was big posters of you all over London and all the rest of it. So I thought it was very, it was very heartwarming that you couldn't care less. You just put on a hat and get on the tube.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, when I look back at that, I realized I was in some form of denial because I don't think I could quite believe what was actually going on.
Yeah, it was so fast, wasn't it? It was really fast.
It was super fast, and it was straight on the first record. It went, that first album went to #1. Terry Wogan was playing it so much, and it was #1 for 6 weeks, and I think I guess it was my way of holding on to some kind of normality,
Right.
And not wanting to suddenly feel completely different to everyone else, and but yeah, it meant that I was able to have some fun, still have fun and still be a bit of a teenager, even though I was 19, 20 by this point.
Yeah. Well, were you very sheltered then when you were growing up? And then this was kind of a moment of freedom?
I think I was actually, because, my dad's a doctor, my mum's, a beautiful housewife. And because we moved over to the UK when I was 8 years old, and it's suddenly like my family goes from a community and a culture where they know everyone to Northern Ireland, Belfast. And it was a totally new situation and landscape. And I think, I was one of those kids who wasn't really allowed to go out on my own until I was about 16, So yeah, I was definitely very much sheltered. So yeah, getting on the road when I was 18, 19 and, having fun with you and, the others was my first time to just, go a bit wild.
Yeah, understandably. And I remember there was one time when you were already in, I think I'd already left the band at this point. And Mike phoned me, we were doing that song by The Cure, Just Like Heaven. Do you remember doing that? We did that in New York, didn't we? And I got in, and we were in the studio the next day, but you and Henry Spinetti and I went drinking for some reason. I can't remember why. And I didn't go to bed till 2:00, and then we were in the studio all day, and I had horrible jet lag. We cut the track, and there was quite a lot of lead guitar work in that. It was on acoustic. I was playing all these little licks and lines and everything. It was really, the track turned out really well. We were all pleased with it. And then Mike said to me, and this was probably about 11:00 at night, and for me that's 4 a.m. And he suddenly says, right, let's cut the whole thing again in a semitone higher, right? The key. I remember blanching and going, oh my God, how am I possibly going to play all that again? In probably what would end up being a rotten key for guitar, like E flat or something terrible. And I hopefully, I'm pretty sure that wasn't the one we used because, and I wanted to say to him, why don't you work out the bloody key before we start? What's wrong with you? First thing you do, isn't it? Work out the key.
I remember the sessions also when we had everyone booked in, coming in, and the song was only it still had a bit to go to be finished. And you were there and Tim was there and you'd all arrived, and I remember just thinking, oh my God, but we're not ready yet. And but Mike always loved working like that. He loved that crazy pressure.
Yeah.
And, you'd all be waiting around and he'd be still madly working at the,
writing the parts in the taxi on the way to record the London Philharmonic, still scribbling parts. Yeah, he's a very adventurous boy. There's no doubt about that. But you made some. We made some really beautiful records together, and you're continue. I was listening to some of your tracks last night, and you're still got exactly the same beautiful voice that you always had. I found it extraordinary when we first started to work together, because you would start quite often with just an acoustic guitar. You'd walk out on your own. And how was it you weren't nervous? Henry and I were talking about this, going, what's wrong with that woman? She hasn't got any nerves. She just walks out there in front of a huge crowd with an acoustic guitar, and you open your mouth, and the first note that comes out, because quite often the first note that comes out of somebody's mouth is just a bit wobbly, you're not quite sure. It would come out like this perfect pitch, sound, and we'd look at each other and go, how does she do that? What's wrong with her? It's not possible. How did you not have any nerves?
I did have nerves, but I think they were sort of quite hidden, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
But then as the years went on and I sort of realized what was actually going on, you know, like,
you got old enough to be nervous.
The magnitude of it, you know, the jobs that depended on what we were doing, on me doing a good job, being healthy, like, you know, delivering the songs well. Then there was a period where I would get nervous. I remember actually one time, it was one of those events that was actually a sort of a very sort of corporate-y event in Switzerland. And we got taken to the side of the stage, ready to go on stage. But the introduction ended up being much longer than we thought it was going to be. And the first song I was singing was If You're a Sailboat. And suddenly, you know, the nerves kicked in and I just suddenly thought, I had no idea what the lyrics are.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
God, yeah.
panicked and said to Colin, the tour manager, and I said, Colin, what are the first few lines? And thankfully, you know, we did have the internet at that point. He was able to look it up. So yeah, no, it does happen. But I don't know. I think there was a sense of just in the early days, just being so shocked by it all and being so surprised by it all that it just kind of flowed out. There almost wasn't time to be nervous when. The older guys like me, I mean, I'm always nervous when I go on, you know, no matter, and it doesn't mean I'm more nervous actually playing to about 30 people in some sort of. I did a gig with Steve Harley recently, just as a guest, and we played in one of those sort of jazz cafe kind of places with about 150 people, something like that. And I played Ronnie Scott's. I've never been as nervous as I was playing Ronnie Scott's because I'm on the stage where all the jazz greats have stood at one time or another. And I thought, you've got no right. You've got no right to be in this room. What are you doing? Go home. Go home and listen to Miles Davis and shut up. Not talking. I mean, I remember. Well, first of all, you know, the way you played was so beautiful, and you know,
thanks.
Like it's just stunning. There's no words, but it shows you that we are all humans after all. When we get up on stage, like no one is above those basic human emotions.
That's true. And I find as I get older, the less I play, the more it seems to work. I did a session for Cat Stevens down in Youssef, as it's known as now, down in the south of France in a studio for a week. And I found the things that they liked best were where I would only play 2 or 3 notes, or some tiny little thing that was just, but it's got to try and be the right 3 notes. But, you know, no showing off at all. The kind of thing that anybody could play. I just happened to be the anybody that day, you know. But I like the fact that playing less really does work. And there's that lovely statement, I think it's probably from somebody like Duke Ellington or Count Basie, that says music is made of notes and spaces, and the spaces are the hardest to play.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But Jim, hold on. Let's not skim over the Cat Stevens record. That's amazing. Is that something? I'm such a big fan of Cat Stevens. Tea for the Tillerman is one of my favourite records.
Well, that was the remake of. It's called Tea for the Tillerman 2, and it's a revisiting of those songs. So we you know, I played. I didn't play on the whole record. They had their regular guitar player came in and played the second week. I did about, I don't know, 9 days or something, and then they had this other chap come in. So I'm not on the whole record, but I'm on quite a lot of it. And I've known him, of course, even longer than I've known you. I was on tour with him, I don't know, in the early 70s.
Wow, on tour with Cat Stevens in the early 70s.
Yeah, but I was working with Linda Lewis, and we were guests on that tour. So I played a bit with him, and I was Linda Lewis's guitar player and musical director, if you can call it that. I like this. I get called musical director sometimes. It's just because I'm the oldest bloke in the room. Well, we need somebody to be in charge. Jim, you look like you could be in charge. All right, then I'll do it. And I shrug it off. I was Rod Stewart's musical director for 10 years. I didn't have to do anything, really. I'd be the one they'd phone up and say, can we rehearse this song in soundcheck? And I'd say, yeah, and that would be it. That's the job. Tell me about I heard, and this is in the sort of gossip and rumor department. Did you have some talks with T-Bone Burnett about producing a record with you?
Absolutely, yeah. We were, actually due to make a record together after the third one that I made with Mike.
Right.
And it was remarkable. We went quite far into the process, and actually not going ahead with that record was quite a disappointment to me, because I was a huge fan of T-Bone Burnett's, and it was actually literally a year after that phenomenal record came out called Raising Sands with Robert Plant and Alison Krauss.
Yeah, it was the record of the year, wasn't it? And
yeah.
It was the number one record in America, which was why he was going to be the right guy for you.
Well, it was just the sounds on it and the feel of it and the musicianship on it and the singing was just outrageous. So we went far into the process. I flew out to LA. T-Bone was just wonderful. And it was the songwriting that just took quite a long time. And then what ended up happening was that, unfortunately, we needed to make the record and get it out quicker than was going to be possible for T-Bone.
Right.
And I finally had that song, The Flood, which ended up being the lead single on the fourth record, and T-Bone, like, one of the comments he made was like, this is such a great song. We need another 11 of these, and at that point we had about 8 or 9 that were all quite in sort of differing styles, and Mike as sort of executive producer, and, Mike was the record company boss and my manager as well. He kind of, he found that feedback quite difficult to take. And he was like, no, I think the songs are there and I think we're ready to go, and, let's find another producer. And I was very much at the time living in England. Even though I'd been touring loads, it was just quite hard to sort of, get that relationship back on track with T-Bone, because he was just so far away. But, he was wonderful. And sadly, we didn't end up making that record. And we ended up working with William Orbit, who was great, completely different style. But, he did a really good job. But there is a sort of happy ending to the story.
Okay.
A few years later, I had a track that I needed to record as a special bonus edition for the greatest hits that we released. I think it was in 2000, and when was it? Oh, it shows my age now. I can't remember. It's about 2016, I think.
Right.
And by this point, I'm now working with new management called ATC. My manager is Sumit Bothra, who's phenomenal. And I told Sumit about having nearly made a record with T-Bone. And he was like, let's fly out there and see what can be done. So I had one track that needed to be recorded, and it was called Diamonds Are Forever, which you'll know, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And we ended up working together on that track, but it was acoustic. So it wasn't the full band vibe that T-Bone is very much known for.
Sure.
But it was still magical to work with him. And it was interesting because I remember I had no headphones during the recording. And I remember being very interested by the fact that he placed the microphones much further away than I had ever seen.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
So you sat in the room with a couple of you were playing the guitar, weren't you?
It was just me playing guitar and nothing else.
Right. Did I see you do that live on stage at some place like the Albert Hall or one of?
Yeah, I did actually. There was it was at the Festival Hall, I think, where they were celebrating Don Black's music and songs. Well, I say music, he's a lyricist.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, they were celebrating, and Don invited me to sing that track.
Okay. I saw that. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. But again, I said to myself, how did she do it? I mean, it's so first of all, your guitar playing was immaculate. And this is, I don't know why I should be surprised, because you've been playing guitar a long time now. But when I first met you, your guitar playing was kind of, slightly clunky and was,
very
on its
clunky.
way. But since then, you've become this really wonderful guitar picker. And to stand out on your own with the guitar and finger pick, it's one thing if you're strumming, that's a bit easier, but to finger pick as well as you, and the Diamonds Are Forever is not an easy song. It's not an easy song to sing. It's not an easy song to play. So I remember being blown away by that, but I didn't realise that you'd worked with T-Bone on that.
He's an absolute legend,
Yeah,
So,
I've met him several times.
yeah, and he seems to have such a magical kind of love of music. This otherworldly. Like one of those people that, similar to Etta James, like there's some kind of an aura where there's a real pure love of music.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that kind of just becomes contagious in the studio,
Yeah. No, and so tell me about what you're up to these days. You say you're writing later today, or you're recording. Do you have a studio at home?
I'm actually talking to you from my studio.
Okay.
And the way my studio looks is it's more like a sort of a writer's workshop office.
Sure.
Because I've basically, in the last few years, I've realized actually for a long time, the thing that mesmerizes me the most with songs is how we play with the lyrics and the words, how music is when it's set against words. So I've done a lot of work on studying lyric writing. So these days, what my writing looks like is me just working on words.
Okay.
And so, so that means I'll go in with a co-composer. We'll flesh out a musical idea, and then I'll take sort of quite a long time to flesh the words out, because I just think it's really important. And I think as a singer who's dabbled with a guitar, and it's so nice to hear your compliments, Jim, about my guitar playing. That's brilliant. I will keep those. To me, it's about how as a singer I bring the words to life and the meaning of them and the characters in them and the stories that they're trying to tell.
Yeah. I'm one of those people too that if the lyric is really useless, the track is going to have to be fantastic, because sometimes you can carry a weak lyric with a great musical hook or a great groove, dance music, for example. But mostly, I'm like you. The lyric is hugely important. And if I'm listening to somebody's, people send me demos and things like that, and I'm listening to them, if the lyric doesn't have anything going for it, I'm switched off right away. They've both got to be right as far as I'm concerned. And it is a struggle to find the interesting themes to write about, and finding lyrical hooks. But hey, this is what we do. Sometimes it's like a puzzle, like a chess puzzle you get in the newspaper, or a Scrabble, trying to find the right words to fit.
True, but what's interesting? There's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot more wisdom and high-level education in the field of literature, and in the field of poetry writing. So, essentially, those are fields that are playing with words too,
sure,
and creating with words. But they have, artistic manuals, should I call them? Thicker than the Pro Tools manuals that we come across. And it goes back all the way to the Greek myths, and like the analysis of them, and how words can be used, in the rhythm of words and the sound of words, and it's a whole world, and it's as rich and as fascinating as the musical space. It's something actually I wanted to mention it. So me and Polly, who we had that night with that you mentioned earlier, we're putting together a podcast, and it's specifically about the detail in songwriting and making records.
Okay.
And,
That sounds like I'd like to listen to that.
yeah, well, I wanted to mention it so that, some of your listeners might, if they're interested, can also come and give us a listen too.
Have you started it yet?
Yeah, we've recorded a few episodes, and we're hoping to release it in a few months' time.
Okay, well, just give me a heads up. I'll have an ear on.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so happy we've had a chance to talk. And you haven't changed. I mean, you're just as pretty and beautiful today as you were when I first met you. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we'll talk again very soon.
I hope so too, Jim. Thank you. It's been an absolute honor.
My pleasure.
Great to see you. Take care.
Okay, God bless. Bye-bye now.
Stars, Cars, Guitars was produced by Tom Stroud.